It was a chilly fall evening in 2013 when I, Alex Carter, received an unexpected call at work. I had been a mechanic for the American railway system for over 18 years, specializing in repairs for both engines and train bogies. Over the years, I had grown accustomed to the everyday grind of fixing faulty machinery and dealing with routine breakdowns. But nothing had prepared me for this call. "Alex, we need you and your team to head out to a remote station near the Allegheny National Forest. There's been a train breakdown, and we need your expertise to repair a bogie that's been abandoned in the middle of nowhere." My supervisor, Jim, explained. The train, traveling from New York City to Chicago, had suffered a major mechanical failure somewhere deep in the woods. The breakdown occurred on a desolate stretch of track, and to ensure the rest of the passengers made it to their destination, the damaged bogie had been left behind. Our mission was clear: head out to this forgotten station, repair the bogie, and ensure it's ready to be reattached to a train that would pass through the area in a few days. The station in question was in a town that had long been abandoned, known once as Greendale. It had been left to decay over the years as people moved away. The station itself had become little more than an afterthought, a relic of a bygone era. But the job had to be done. And, as always, I didn't think much about the dangers of the job. I was used to hard work and long hours. I gathered a small team of skilled workers, including my trusted colleagues. Henry, a veteran mechanic with decades of experience, Lucas, a young and eager assistant mechanic, and Sarah, the station's electrician, who was responsible for all electrical work. We loaded our tools and provisions onto a small service truck, stocked up on water and food, and made our way toward the station. We drove for hours, leaving the bustling city behind as we ventured deeper into the Pennsylvania wilderness. The roads became narrow and winding, the dense trees of the forest closing in around us. The further we went, the more isolated it felt. We could only rely on our GPS and maps to find the station, which was tucked away in a place that few had even heard of. By the time we reached the station, it was already dark. The road ended abruptly, and we parked the truck near an old, rusted railway line that led into the forest. The air was thick with fog, and the trees loomed like silent sentinels, their branches swaying gently in the cool breeze. A strange unease settled over me as I looked around. The station was a ghost town, and the silence felt unnatural, as if the very earth was holding its breath. The station building, a crumbling structure made of brick and wood, stood just beyond the tracks. It looked as though it hadn't been inhabited in decades. We unloaded our tools and set up camp inside the abandoned train compartment that had been left behind. There was no electricity here, nothing but the dim light of our flashlights and the flickering flames of the fire we built to cook our dinner. The first night was uneventful, aside from the strange silence that hung in the air. We settled in, ate our simple dinner, and began our work. The bogie was in poor condition, its axles were damaged, and there were several other parts that needed replacing. It would take us at least a few days to fix it, but we were prepared for the task. The isolation of the area seemed to give the work a sense of urgency, as though the clock was ticking. That night, after a long day of work, we settled into the bogie to rest. The air had grown colder, and the sound of the wind through the trees was all we could hear. I remember feeling uneasy, but I didn't think much of it. We were all tired, and sleep soon overtook us. In the dead of night, I was awoken by a strange sound, a faint tapping against the metal walls of the train. At first, I thought it was the wind or the rustling of animals outside. But then the tapping grew louder, almost rhythmic, like someone or something was walking around our bogie. I sat up in bed, my heart racing. I glanced over at Henry, Lucas, and Sarah, all of whom were still fast asleep. I held my breath, listening. The tapping continued, but it wasn't the wind. It sounded like footsteps, soft and deliberate. My instincts screamed at me to stay still, to remain as quiet as possible. But something inside me urged me to check outside. Slowly, I crept to one of the windows and peeked out into the forest. There was nothing, no person, no animal, just the deep blackness of the woods. I sat back down on the floor, trying to shake off the unease that had settled into my bones. It wasn't uncommon for animals to wander near train stations, but there was something different about this feeling. The sense that we were being watched lingered in the air like a heavy fog. I decided to ignore it and try to sleep again. But it wasn't long before I heard it again, the tapping, now louder and more persistent. My pulse quickened. The sound wasn't coming from the forest anymore. It was right outside the train. I was paralyzed with fear. The noise stopped suddenly, and in that silence, I heard something else breathing. Deep, labored breathing, as if someone or something was standing right outside the bogie. By morning, the strange noises had stopped, but the feeling of being watched didn't fade. I tried to push the fear aside and focused on the work that needed to be done. Henry and Lucas were already up and working on the bogie, but Sarah seemed a little more shaken than usual. I asked her if she'd heard anything strange the previous night, but she simply nodded, her face pale. That day, we continued with the repairs, but the feeling of unease never left. Every time I glanced around the station, I noticed how the forest seemed to close in around us, as if the trees themselves were pressing in, watching our every move. The sound of the wind through the branches seemed almost too loud, and at times, I thought I heard something moving just beyond the tree line. At nightfall, we gathered around the fire again, trying to shake off the strange tension in the air. Lucas, ever the brave one, suggested that we play a game to pass the time. He proposed a variation of the horror challenge, a game where you go into a dark, abandoned place, record a video, and stay there for a set amount of time to prove your courage. "We're in the middle of nowhere," he said with a grin. "What's the worst that could happen?" Sarah and Henry weren't too keen on the idea, but I could tell they were just as curious as I was. Against my better judgment, we decided to go along with it. Lucas volunteered to be the first to take the challenge. He grabbed his phone, turned on the camera, and stepped toward the old station building. The rest of us sat around the fire, watching nervously as he disappeared into the darkness. We waited in silence, the fire crackling and the wind howling through the trees. After what seemed like an eternity, Lucas returned, looking shaken. "I don't know what I saw," he stammered. "There was something in that building, I swear. I saw something move, something big and dark. It was watching me." We all laughed nervously, chalking it up to his overactive imagination. But the unease in the air had only grown stronger. On the third night, things took a darker turn. I woke up to the sound of footsteps again, but this time they were unmistakable. There was no mistaking it. They were human footsteps. I immediately got up and grabbed my flashlight. As I stepped outside, the forest was eerily still, not a single sound except for my own breath. I called out into the darkness, but there was no response. The air felt heavier than ever, and a chill ran down my spine. I took a step forward and then froze. Just ahead of me, I saw something moving between the trees, something large and dark, its shape barely visible in the shadows. I stepped back slowly, heart pounding in my chest. Then, without warning, I heard a voice, a low, guttural whisper that seemed to come from all directions at once. "Leave now, or suffer." The voice sent a chill through my bones, and I turned to run back to the train. But when I looked around, my crew was nowhere to be seen. They had all vanished into the woods, and I was alone. Panicking, I sprinted to the bogie, where I found them huddled together, pale and terrified. They had heard the same whispers, and something had followed them back to the train. "Whatever it is, it's not human," Henry whispered. "We need to get out of here now," but it was too late. The shadowy figure from the forest had already found us, its glowing green eyes staring from the darkness. That night, we didn't sleep. We stayed close to the train, watching the woods nervously. We knew we had to finish the job and leave before whatever it was took us. The next morning, we finished the repairs as quickly as possible, barely speaking as we worked. Every noise made us jump. Every rustle in the trees sent us into a panic. As we packed up and waited for the incoming train, we kept our eyes peeled for any sign of movement. We couldn't shake the feeling that something was waiting for us, just beyond the trees. Finally, the train arrived, and we boarded as quickly as we could. We left Greendale behind, never looking back, but I knew one thing for certain. Whatever haunted that station, it wasn't human, and it would never let us forget.